My name is Eugene Daniels. I am a political White House correspondent and also co-author of Political Playbook. Super excited to be here with two-term Kansas Governor Laura Kelly, a Democrat in a red state who is the chief executive of a state that goes red every single year, who has during her election and re-election put the healthcare concerns of her state at front and center. When you're a Democrat with a red legislature and conservative history, you have to put aside some of the ideological differences and challenges for bolstering public health, saving lives during pandemics, and delicate decisions about reproductive health and gender-affirming care. So she's gonna give you guys all a playbook on how to make hard, sometimes unpopular choices amid a legislative consensus. And we're gonna fix democracy right here and now, Governor. Done, see? 50 minutes to fix democracy, that's all it took, one conversation. We will have some time toward the end for audience questions, so don't be shy. We will have someone running a mic to you guys as that comes down. Governor, thank you so much for being here.
Delighted.
So first, I wanna start with an issue that everyone's talking about in the political world, which is abortion. Your state in 2022, just months after the Dobbs decision came down, became the first to vote on and then eventually reject a constitutional amendment that would have banned essentially all abortion in the state. Since then, Democrats and pro-abortion advocates have worked to mimic that success in other states. Do you feel like that is replicable in a presidential election? What was behind your red state voting against this constitution?
Well, first of all, Eugene, I am one person who does not talk about abortion. And that's why I've been able to get things done. That's why I've been able to get elected, is because opponents would always use those hot button issues to try to lure me into conversations that he didn't want to have. And so it's not something I talk about, but it is something, first as a state senator for 14 years and as governor, that I have always, I voted the right way, and then I have vetoed bills that have come over my desk that were absolutely unnecessary. The way that the abortion amendment, a ballot initiative happened back in 2022 in August was we don't have initiative and referendum in Kansas, so only the legislature can put items on the ballot. And so the House will vote for the constitutional amendment, the Senate will vote for the constitutional amendment. It bypasses me. I have no opportunity to do anything with it. It goes right onto the ballot. Well, the legislature got a little too cute and clever, and instead of putting it on the general election ballot, they decided to put it on the primary ballot. And they did that on purpose because in Kansas, Democrats often don't vote in primary because we don't have any primaries. There aren't that many of us. And independents can't vote in primaries. You have to be registered in a party. And then in the Republican Party even, usually the folks who actually show up are the most extreme. And so they purposely put it on there figuring slam dunk, this will be done. But what they didn't anticipate was Dobbs' decision came out, and that was very helpful. That certainly focused the attention on the issue.
Just a little bit.
But then we had some amazing people in Kansas who really just put together an entity. It was called Kansans for Constitutional Freedom. Now, if that isn't taking a page out of their playbook, and it worked. So we focused on freedom, not on abortion, not on reproductive rights, but on freedom, and then raised a ton of money and did an incredible campaign. When all was said and done, we defeated that amendment. That's what we needed to do. We defeated it by nearly 60% of Kansans. So.
Does that feel settled in your state? Does it something?
No.
Does it? I mean, when you're talking to the groups that have done this and do this work and are focused on freedom, not abortion, I'll take your lane here. Do they feel worried that that something like this might come back, that they'll have to keep fighting this battle over and over again?
We will fight it for a very forever probably.
Yeah.
But I think what we did see, though, as a result of what happened in Kansas, is you just look at the states that followed us, Michigan and Ohio and they followed our lead, and they were able to defeat some really bad legislation. So I think it did set a tone. But what every state like that is going to face will, particularly if they've got an all-Republican legislature, essentially, and we've got supermajority in both the House and in the Senate in the state of Kansas. And so with that, they're going to consistently come back with anti-abortion legislation, which I then need to veto it and hope that I can have that veto sustained. To that end, I actually have now set up a PAC that I'm raising money into so that we can break those supermajorities, so that I don't have to worry about trying to find a Republican who will cross over and vote with the Democrats. So we're working hard to do that so that we can protect freedoms better that way, consistently.
I want to get to that PAC later on, but you talked about kind of like this tenor that's happening. You have Ohio, Arizona also has some kind of referendum on abortion that'll be on the November ballot. It looks like Florida maybe. There's probably others that we haven't seen yet. When you kind of think about how pro-abortion advocates and Democrats are able to use that freedom, question and answer in this ballot, how do you think about how it led to your victory in your re-election, but also is that something other Democrats are going to have an easier job replicating, or was it something specific about kind of the anger people had on almost being tricked with it being during the primary election?
I don't think Kansans were angry about that.
I think angry in interviews.
I think they were angry about Dobbs, and that's what brought them out. It's too down in the weeds to understand the difference between the primary ballot and the general ballot. So I think it really was the Dobbs decision that alerted everybody that danger was on the horizon. And that was compounded by our Supreme Court's original ruling, is that reproductive rights are protected in the Kansas Constitution. So that set the stage, and then Dobbs just lit the fire.
Another huge issue that you've been working on tackling is Medicaid expansion. Kansas is one of just 10 states in the union that didn't expand the benefits under the Affordable Care Act. First, I want to zoom out. There feels like in these red states like yours that there is this renewed sense of energy behind the expansions. Why do you think that is?
Well, because I refuse to give up.
Simple.
I don't like losing. So, but actually, I think I have now presented 6 proposals to the Kansas legislature. And actually, the Kansas legislature, when I was in the legislature, we actually passed Medicaid expansion in 2017. But our then Governor Brownback vetoed it. And then after that, it's been pretty much history. But we noticed what happened in North Carolina. And so we actually sent teams down to North Carolina, and we had lots of conversations with them, taking pages out of their playbook because they were able to get Medicaid expanded this year. So we learned from them, and then we stopped my usual, kumbaya approach to governing and, bringing everybody together and, see if we can come to consensus. I did that 5 times, And so this time, we took a much more political, just blatantly political approach to it. And I went out on the campaign trail, much like I had done in 2018 and 2022, that this was, we were just going to have to approach it like that because it was a political issue by now. No longer was there was no good reason to not expand Medicaid. We knew that. All of the opposition, all of the concerns had been debunked by the 40 other states that had expanded Medicaid. So they had no real good reasons for doing it anymore. It was just political. So we went after it politically, using what we learned from North Carolina, really bringing in our business community, and bringing them in special by sector, and talking to them about how Medicaid expansion would impact their sector. And so we had a bunch of aviation executives because we a big aviation industry in Kansas. So we had all these aviation CEOs sitting around the table, and they were sort of going, why are we here? We provide health insurance for our employees. I said, yeah, but your employees have daycares that don't provide health insurance, and those workers that would be eligible for Medicaid. So that's how it impacts, so that your workers have someplace to leave their kids so they can come do their jobs. So we just spent a lot of time, and I know that that's exactly what North Carolina did, and that made a difference, at least this time. We didn't get it passed, but we did at least force a conversation, and we had local citizens or citizens from all over the state showing up at the Capitol. We had hundreds and hundreds of them. We had 900 people present testimony, not present, but submit testimony for this. I mean, it was clear. So we really put the pressure on, and I think we've turned it into now a campaign issue that we will use as we're going door to door this August and November.
Yeah, you talked about your PAC, and you've talked about kind of building this outside pressure and kind of being forced to be a little bit more political with it. I guess as you went around and not just talked to, the CEOs and the folks in charge, when you talked to the people, were they surprised that there was so much gamesmanship happening in the State House over this issue, when I think for many of them, polling will show that, it seemed like a no-brainer?
Oh, very definitely. All the polling that's been done in Kansas has shown 70 to 80% of Kansans, depending upon the poll, favor Medicaid expansion. I wouldn't say that people were so much shocked as that they were furious. We'd gotten beyond the shocked that so we've been doing this for so long. But I think when you get down to the grassroots, they were just angry that we were still having this conversation 6 years later, actually 10 years later. So, your neighboring states, Missouri, Nebraska, Oklahoma, not states known for liberal policies, they've expanded it through ballot initiatives in recent years. What's happening in your state where the state legislature is looking around at the other states doing it that looks similar to yours and not doing it? What's the holdup? You had 2 hearings. That's been a big win for you, but it still seems like a slog happening. It really boils down to now the leadership in both the House and the Senate, particularly in the House, where it's just he's ideologically dug in. He's living back, in Obamacare days, and when there was all that angst about it, and really has just not come into 2024. And the fact that he is an insurance salesman, I think, has something to do with it. But, well, it's really it is sad, but we've got the Speaker of the House sells insurance, and the chair of the Senate Health Committee sells insurance. It's a problem. So that's why we decided to go at it more politically, because I've been convinced for the last several years that if we could ever get to a debate and a vote on the House floor and the Senate floor, it would pass. The rank and file get a lot of pressure from back home, and they would do it, but the leadership has just not allowed them to have that debate or that vote.
There feels like a different conversation in Republican circles and the party around the country and in your state about kind of what they're willing to accept from the federal government or from their own state government, and what kind of benefits should be provided. And I wonder if you think COVID had a lot to do with that, right? You had people getting all these COVID benefits, getting checks from the government, and it seems to have changed the way that even Republicans talk about Medicaid, Medicare, all of those earned benefits.
No, I don't think it was COVID related at all, because these people were pretty anti-poor people before COVID. In a lot of our other things, whether you thinking about food stamps or temporary assistance for needy families, our state legislature had been very miserly and cruel, actually.
No, but I mean the people, like the voters, their acceptance of what they expect the government to be doing for them. It seems that they are more willing to accept benefits, Medicaid is more interesting to them because of things like COVID, where they saw that the government should maybe have more of a hand than they thought in the past.
Yeah, well, in Kansas, I don't think COVID helped us in our relationship with the legislature and anything healthcare related. Au contraire. But I think that I think the issue that probably has made the public more aware of the need for Medicaid expansion is the recognition of the mental health crisis that we're experiencing in our state. Because so many people can relate to that, and so many people can relate to not having coverage for mental health services. So that, I think, has been a connector and a reason that more Kansas generically believe that we ought to expand Medicaid and cover those 150,000 people.
Yeah, one of the things that you kind of added into the pot when negotiating for Medicaid expansion was work requirements, something that Republicans had wanted for a long time. Was that the kick that it needed to get those hearings and start moving this along?
No. I'd like to tell you that, but that didn't make any difference. I think what got us the hearings was the incredible pressure that we put on them by doing that campaign and going all over the state, everywhere, everybody, and they were just getting a lot of pressure from back home to do that. So they didn't have any choice but to at least allow the hearings to happen.
It's almost like the voters are a very important part of the process.
You're correct.
Did you get any blowback from Democrats when you added that work requirement in there?
Yes. Yes, a lot, including a number of our advocacy groups. We actually weren't trying to do this all by ourselves. We had lots of folks around the state of Kansas working with us to get this passed. And so when I put the work requirements in there, I did get a lot of blowback. But the reason that I was comfortable putting them in there is, one, because we know that about 75% of the people who are eligible for Medicaid expansion are working. But they're working in those daycare centers, they're working in our restaurants, they're working construction or some other seasonal work. They don't have health covered by their employers. So we know that they need that. And so I think, I knew that so many of them were already working. And we also, have a very robust workforce development and training center. And we know that we can put people over there and get them appropriately employed if they're not. So I just didn't think it was going to impact that many people. And I thought, why would we not get it for the 110,000 who were working, just because we had some who were not, and probably with good reason. They're home taking care of a kid, an elderly parent. They've got mental health issues that preclude their going into the workforce. So I just thought it wasn't going to hurt anybody. And so that's why I did it.
Are you hopeful that you'll get a bill on your desk here in the next few months, or is it going to take this election to shake things up?
Well, we're a part-time legislature, so we can't really do anything until next January. So, and we will do something, and we will not stop until we get this passed. And that's one of the reasons that I want to break this supermajority is because I want to send a message to the leaders in both the House and the Senate that they're going to have to work with us because they don't have the veto-proof majority. So we'll just keep doing what we need to do.
I did a panel yesterday with some pollsters, who I see two of them here today, on healthcare, and how much the cost and affordability of healthcare has changed the way voters think about the overall economy, right? They think about how the economy is bad because of how expensive healthcare is. It's not their biggest issue, but when you ask and drill down, the cost of healthcare is one of their biggest concerns. How do you think about and go about in your own state dealing with the cost of healthcare?
Well, actually, the legislature has been spending money to not expand Medicaid for the last 3 years, I believe, because I have put Medicaid expansion in my budget every year. And every year they have taken it out of the budget. And when they take it out of the budget, we then have to backfill about $75 million because we're not getting the money in from the feds. And the feds have, aside from, picking up 90% of the cost of the actual Medicaid expansion, they also are offering an incentive for these last 10 states to get on board. So we give up at least $75 million every year when we don't, in addition to the other Medicaid money that would come in.
Is the cost of healthcare a huge issue for folks in your state?
Yeah, we're no different than any place else. Healthcare is very expensive, and it's not Medicaid, and it's everybody's healthcare is very, very expensive. That's not a problem I can solve, at the state level. I mean, that really is something that I wish Congress would deal with.
There's a long list of things that we all wish Congress would deal with. As someone who lives
I know.
Yeah, that one's high on the list, but it's a very long list. You're a Democrat running a red state. That's a shrinking title. Nowadays, there's Andy Beshear in Kentucky. You could probably argue Roy Cooper in North Carolina, not a swing state anymore, though Democrats always hope for the best every 4 years. Do you have like a group chat? Do you commiserate on how you do it, how to keep it, how to stay in the middle and work across the aisle and actually get stuff done despite the partisanship? First question, is there a group chat?
I'm not going to tell you. Those are not the kind of conversations I have with my colleagues, other governors. We talk about, just because Kansas is unique. Even from North Carolina, I mean, that's probably.
Who are we pointing out to over here?
Oh, he's the Health and Human Services guy.
Wait,
in North Carolina, yeah. So I think you've got North Carolina. Kentucky is very much like Kansas, but those are just not conversations because. What Andy Beshear can do in his state, what he needs to do and how he relates to his people is different than he's Andy and I'm not. And so I have to do it the way that works for me. And so we don't have those kinds of conversations. We have conversations about a lot of other things, but most people will be surprised it's not really about business so much as it is, just we've become friends.
Yeah. Do you want to tell us any of the conversations?
No.
I didn't think so. Had to ask. The people want to know.
Nope.
You do better with rural voters than a lot of your party. There's essentially kind of a Laura Kelly playbook, as we put it in an article last year. Lose by less in rural areas. Not win them, but lose by less.
Yep.
Don't get pulled into fighting about everything that Republicans want you to do when it comes to the culture wars, and focus on local economic issues. Is this something your party should be deploying more and more in even states that maybe aren't red?
Absolutely. I think, and I don't think it's just Democrats. I think Republicans also. I think we all just ignore our rural areas to our state's demise. It's the rural areas in every state, and I don't care if you're in New York. There's a lot of rural when you go upstate. So yes, I do think that Democrats, Republicans too, but I'll just advocate for Democrats here. I do think that they should spend a whole lot more time and an inordinate amount of time courting rural voters. I'll give you an example. When first time I ran for the state senate was back in 2004, and I was trying to take out a Republican incumbent, and my district was pretty Republican. So my campaign manager said to me, my district was about a third of Shawnee County, which is where the capital is, Topeka, and then one very rural, very small, 7,000 people county to the west. My campaign manager said, "Laura, don't bother going to Wabaunsee County. There aren't enough votes there to make a difference." And I just said, that just doesn't sound right. And so I went to Wabaunsee County in an inordinate amount of time. I knocked on every single door I could get to in every tiny little town there. A lot of doors I couldn't get to because it is really rural. But I did knock on every single door. When I woke up Wednesday morning, we did not know Tuesday night whether I'd won or lost. When I woke up Wednesday morning, I was up by 39 votes. If I had not knocked on those doors in Wabaunsee County, I would never have been in the Senate, and I certainly wouldn't be here today. So I've taken that. I just knew it, gut, then I proved my theory, and I've taken that throughout the course of my political career, is really focusing on them. Because when you do that, it doesn't take much, but I know if I have a town hall in a small town and only 6 people show up, those 6 people are going to go back and tell everybody else, by the next day at 3 p.m. at the coffee shop, everybody's going to know you're in town and what you said. And sometimes in rural communities, it's just showing up. It's being there, showing you care. And then I did more. When I was running for governor the first time, we put together a very comprehensive plan for rural prosperity. And so we went through all the issues, whether it was housing, healthcare, education, childcare, water. We had a plan. And then when I did win, we actually implemented that plan.
Go figure. You did the things that you said.
Did.
That's so weird.
Yes, I know.
That politicians would do. Wow. Yeah. And you win again.
I did. So we
take note, people. The Laura Kelly playbook.
Yeah. We now have an Office of Rural Prosperity in our Department of Commerce.
Why do you think Democrats and Republicans aren't doing that? Right. Republicans talk a lot about how and get a lot of votes from rural voters. But why do you think they don't do the things that you're talking about? Because
they listen to the professionals.
Who are the professionals?
Well, like my campaign manager.
Name names.
I just didn't listen to him. I think, I even had it in my gubernatorial campaign. One of the people here is on my staff in 2018. I can remember then, and again in 22, the campaign wants you to focus on the big media markets. So you got to go to the Kansas City market. You got to go to the Wichita market. You got to go to the Topeka market. They don't like it when you go to Hays, Kansas, or someplace where there's because you remember. But by doing that, because I believe that I get a lot of unpaid media when I go out there, and I think it has absolutely much more impact when people can say, who was here today, it just works. Or who came to my door today.
You told my colleague when he interviewed you last year that while you were a state legislator, you made sure to, quote, vote in a way that might spark some flames, but I would never be throwing them. And, you talked about kind of not being pulled in to culture war fights, but you have vetoed anti-LGBTQ plus bills before and after the most recent election. You obviously support abortion rights. So how do you strike that balance of kind of doing the things, like fighting the culture war battles, but doing that with the work instead of doing it in front of the cameras, which is not something that many politicians are doing nowadays? Take that as a compliment, I think. Okay.
Yeah, actually, I started my career, not my career, but very first job I had out of high school was working with kids from Harlem and Bedford-Stuyvesant in New York. And this was a time when things were really tough. This was the late 80s or late 60s, early 70s. And so the cities were on fire, if you remember. And the kids came up with all of those issues. I mean, they were mad. And so they were angry, and they displayed that anger, and they took it out. I got attacked verbally all the time and physically. And I just found that working with those kids that, they were going to say anything, call me any name in the book, try to get my goat. Mm-hmm. And that's what I think, politicians do.
They're angry kids.
My real career did start working with emotionally disturbed adolescents.
Well,
and yeah, there were a lot like that. I think I learned long ago that if you really want to have a conversation, you really want to get something done, that you don't react to the shiny objects. You don't react to the anger. You let it dissipate and then see if you can start conversations.
Do you ever worry that the groups, the marginalized groups that feel like they're being attacked, women when it comes to abortion, LGBTQ groups, others, who don't see you publicly defending and protecting them, do you ever worry how they are interpreting that? And how, I guess, how do you strike that balance of making sure that they know that you're actually doing the work and you're not getting pulled into the fight?
Well, they know. I mean, I'm... first of all, women in their reproductive rights, they know just from my time in the Senate, that I voted all the time. And then as governor, again, I have vetoed all the anti-freedom bills that have come across my desk. With the LGBTQ community, I know they know, and they tell me all the time. I have a lot of, and first of all, it's not like I never go out. I go to rallies, and I'll if there's a rally at the State House, I'll be out there. I'll speak.
You don't chase every single fight,
I just don't fight it on the. I didn't fight it on the Senate floor, and I'm not going to fight it in the governor's office. It's not going to be that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. But that doesn't diminish my support for the groups, and nor does it stop me from displaying that support. It's just not in a political argument.
You mentioned kind of changing from abortion and talking more about freedom. It's been interesting to watch over the last few years. I cover largely federal politics, and President Biden has done the same thing, right? Talked about trying to take freedom back, the word freedom, from Republicans. And I guess when you think about how you and other members of your party, the president, have enlarged that, because now you can say, we want to protect your freedoms, they don't. People can read into that whatever they want, right? People can say, my freedom as a queer person, my freedom as a woman, my freedom as a black or brown person. And I guess, does it feel like the party is getting behind that across the country, or is this something that just a few of you are doing?
No, I think you can look at Gretchen Whitmer in Michigan. She's out there speaking very much like that. Michelle Lujan Grisham down in New Mexico, Andy Beshear. I mean, I think you can look all across, and you've got Democrat governors that are out there talking, but messaging in that way. So I think people absolutely know we've got their back, but we're not getting their back in a confrontational way. We're doing it in a way that draws people in, including people who might not have ordinarily had their back or cared about their back.
I was talking to your team before we do this. I know you guys think this is the first time that we've talked about what was going to be in this conversation, but when I was talking to your team about themes, one of the things they brought up is that, for you, compromise is not a dirty word, and that you work to not let the perfect get in the way of the good. And I'm curious if do you feel like it's getting harder to operate in that way?
Yes. When I came into the Senate again in 2005, I was one of 8 Democrats in the Senate. There were 32 Republicans. So I was a math major when I went to college, so I figured, if I really want to get anything done, I'm gonna have to go over and work with those folks and bring some in. So that's what I did. But the thing is, then they were actually open to that. I was the ranking member on Ways and Means, the Budget Committee in the Senate, and I was back in the back room when we were setting up our offer to the House during conference committees, and I was very much a part of all of that. When things changed, and that change came in 2012 in Kansas, when Sam Brownback was elected governor in 2010. So for the 2012 election, he decided that he wanted to get rid of all those moderate Republicans who would work with Democrats, and he did a really good job. There were very few left standing when he was finished with his work, including our Senate president. So yes, it has gotten much harder, and and I get back. That's why I need to break the supermajority, is because I can't reach And over the 5 years, I have had to rely on some at least reasonable Republicans who would consider on certain issues, whether it was gay rights or whether it was women's rights or school funding or whatever. If I would veto something like vouchers, I could count on a few of the Republicans coming over and sustaining that veto. That's getting harder and harder because the Republicans are now eating their own, and they're going after any of them who will cross that line even once during a session.
Yeah. Do you worry, not just in your state, about the increased partisanship? I assume the answer is yes. Across the country, and I guess more importantly for me is who's to blame for that increased partisanship? You don't have to name names, but
yeah. Well, I have never liked to generically blast another party or a group of people. But I've got to say that in this case, in some ways, it's got to be put on the Republicans for doing this. Democrats, if you look at Congress, for instance, in the Democrats, you've got your left wing types, and then you've got your more moderate. But they'll come together on issues. They're occasionally they don't, but usually they'll come together. You look at the Republican Party and the way they're operating, it's not really the Republican Party. It is these factions that have sprung off and made it impossible and used their power, because unfortunately you don't always need a majority in Congress to get something not done. And so they've been very, very successful. I worry. I think it's dangerous. I'm hoping that at some point, somebody somewhere, somebodies will be able to break through and get in there and really make a difference.
How do we fix it? As someone who has worked her entire political career walking across the aisle and doing, I'm not good at math, but I'm glad you were, going back and forth with the math and understanding that at some point a bill has to make it to a governor's desk. How do you fix that? How do you work with, how does Congress fix that? Or is it unfixable?
In Congress, I don't have an answer for Congress, honestly.
No one does. I thought I'd ask.
In Kansas, the way that we do it is exactly how we just did. We had a really contentious session on tax cuts in Kansas. I've been wanting to provide tax cuts for several years now. I have presented, again, proposals for tax cuts. What the Republicans have done with it, though, is they've taken it and they have fashioned it in a way that would take us back to the Brownback eras. And those of you who don't know, Sam Brownback was a governor. He did the tax experiment that absolutely decimated our state. And we've spent the first few years as governor undoing a lot of that. the proposals that they've come up with would take us back. It wouldn't be as quick or as ugly as it was when Brownback did it, but eventually we would get back to those days of 4-day school weeks and not fixing our roads or building bridges. So I just couldn't do that. So we kept coming back, kept vetoing, and fortunately there were enough people who helped me out and sustain those vetoes. And I finally ended up having to call a special session. And we just finished that special session this past Tuesday, and we were able to come to a compromise. I dug my heels in. I would not sign a bill that was going to take us back to the Brownback days. But I did compromise on some things that I didn't want to. You know, we have a three-tier system for income taxes right now in Kansas. I agreed to go to a 2-tier. I don't like it, but we had to come up with something, and we need to get those tax cuts out to folks. So we did that, and that's how I do it. I just I'm willing to compromise, but I'll then dig in. You know, there are certain things I won't compromise on.
Yeah, I could do this with you all day, but I think we probably have a few questions in the audience. We have someone that will run around with the mic. If we have one right here in the front. He's sprinting to you. We'll get.
Thank you for sprinting. Thank you, too, for a really great session. I'm Janet Tomiyama. I'm a professor of psychology at UCLA. And a lot of the conversation today really centered around health care. But we know from like the Whitehall studies from the UK that health care is only like a small driver of ultimate health. So I'm wondering what Kansas is doing to promote health that's not specifically through insurance or health care.
Yeah, a lot. You know, well, actually, my background is mental health, and so, you know, I have tried since I've been a state senator and now as governor to fill in the gaps in the continuum of care in mental health, and we've done some really amazing things where, you know, we've gotten very engaged in making mental health care accessible to more folks. This is something we did learn from the pandemic. Mental health with adolescents is phenomenal. Really, really works. And so we're starting to incorporate that. We have formed partnerships with our school districts and our community mental health centers and other community mental health providers so that we now have licensed social workers and psychologists in our schools, but they're employed by the community mental health centers, so they're available 365, 24/7, versus the school psychologist who be there when school's in. So we wanted to make sure that those resources are available, and that's proven to be an incredibly successful program. But then beyond just specific to mental health, and we're doing a whole lot of other things specific to mental health, but I'm also very, very focused on early childhood education. Because of my work in mental health, and also I worked in a prison for boys a long time ago. And each time I worked in those environments, I realized it was way too late. And so I became a major advocate for early childhood intervention. And we have been investing lots and lots in setting up public-private partnerships in our communities so that we have more available quality child care all across the state. We've gone into our prisons, and actually we're working with our counties because we know that a lot of the people in our county jails actually have mental health issues, and so we're collaborating with them. And then in our prisons, we just remodeled one of our prisons to take it from being a medium security facility to actually being a substance abuse treatment facility, because while I wish we wouldn't incarcerate people with substance abuse or disorder, we have to sometimes. And so we want to make sure that they at least go into an environment where they can get treatment in addition to being locked up. We took another facility that had been actually in our veterans system and had been mothballed. So we took that facility, and we've changed it now into a corrections facility, but it's really for geriatric our geriatric prisoners who no longer need, not going to do anything, but really need to be more in a nursing home kind of environment, or a place where they could get counseling and other services. So we've gone way outside our just pure mental health system to incorporate other programs and services that I think ultimately have a huge impact on mental health.
Any others? One right there.
Hi, I'm Marcia. I'm with Leadership Tulsa in Tulsa, Oklahoma, your neighbor.
Yeah.
I'm interested, in our state, DEI is a curse word. What reframing of a narrative have you done successfully in Kansas? I know some of the work you've done also in partnership with the Kansas Leadership Center. What are some better ways to bring some more people to the middle on that?
Well, don't feel too bad about Oklahoma. We're not that much farther ahead than you are on that issue. In fact, this past session, we really had to battle with the legislature because they wanted to just strip any mention, any action in our higher education system. So what we did, though, is rather than battling it out, because they're going to win that battle, they got a whole lot more people than I do. We worked behind the scenes with some legislators to really water down that bill so that it looks like they got what they wanted, but it really doesn't do anything.
So trick them is.
Well, please don't broadcast this.
It's just us.
Giving away my trade secrets here, but
No one will know.
it really is. I mean, I think you just have to. You have a harder time because you've got a Republican legislature and a Republican governor, so you don't have the bullhorn or the authority, the power that really does come from the executive position. So it's going to be tougher for you. That's all I can say, and be glad to do anything we can to help. But it's tough. I know some Oklahoma legislators from my time in the Senate, and I think that legislature has gotten even more conservative than when I was in the legislature. So you're just going to have to somehow appeal to the people. You're going to have to somehow get people to recognize how detrimental that is to your state. And one of the things that I did do, sort of related to that, but when I talk to CEOs all the time now, we do a lot of business recruitment into the state of Kansas. And one of the things that was clear when I would be talking to the CEO from Panasonic or the CEO from Urban Outfitters is that, they need workforce. So they don't want these policies that are discriminatory or that push people out of the state. So I use that information to sometimes as a weapon with the legislature to let them know that this is going to have economic impact. And North Carolina, you come up again.
That's getting a lot of play.
No, North Carolina passed the bathroom bill several years ago. And I think it was like overnight, you lost $400 million in convention business, and then you had businesses that, had sort of packed up the van, ready to move, and they go, never mind, we're not going. And North Carolina eventually repealed that bill. So that's what has to happen in Oklahoma too. It has to go so far, and then businesses react, and then maybe you can get something done.
The checkbooks.
It's true. It's true.
Any others? One question that I always love to kind of end with when I do these, especially with politicians, is what keeps you up at night? Or do you sleep like a baby? I assume you do not as a governor, but what keeps you up at night?
This question came, I was in an event last night and this question came up.
I thought this was my special question. That's okay.
No. But There really is not anything in particular, other than, I really want everything that we've done well in Kansas, to be there when I'm gone. And, that it probably concerns me more than anything, because I watched what happened when Kathleen Sebelius, who was governor, did a lot of great things. She's out the door, Sam Brownback comes in the door, gone. I don't want that. That worries me. And again, that's why I hate to keep going back to the PAC, but it really is a driver, because we'll focus on the November elections this year, but then I will turn that PAC and focus on the gubernatorial race in 2026, because I want, for the first time in Kansas history, to elect a Democrat governor after a Democrat governor. It's never happened before, so I want to make that happen. But I also want to do that to protect what we've been able to get done. And then I'm going to go after the Attorney General, too. So,
She got a list.
I do.
A long list.
So, yeah.
You talking about that, about going and helping the next governor. There aren't a lot of politicians who aren't thinking about their own next move, right? They're constantly, you mentioned some of these governors who are kind of in the running, theoretically, for 2028. I don't think you have presidential ambitions. Feel free to break that news now if you do. But I guess, what do you think about the lack of kind of like that George Washington, when people leave the political arena and do more, working behind the scenes, that it doesn't happen as much?
I think it does happen sometimes, but I'm in a very fortunate position. First of all, I was elected governor way past my prime.
There's no such thing.
Yeah, there is. And plus I didn't really want to be governor. This was not. It was
the best job.
I hate to tell you that. I really didn't want to be governor, but Kansas was in such bad shape. It was really hurting, and I looked at what was on the Democrat ticket for the primary, and I thought, there's not one person there who can get through a Democrat primary. The one guy I thought might be able to win in a general had voted against women in the time that he was in the House, and so I knew he'd never get through a primary, even though I thought he might be able to get some crossover votes in a general election. And then I looked at the guy that I thought would win the primary, and no self-respecting Republican would vote for him, just because he'd been so hard to work with when he was in the House. And so thought, I knew Republicans would vote for me. They already had. So I really could not let Chris Kobach become governor of the state of Kansas, and that's why I decided to run. But it was also, so there was no ambition there, and I have none now, and I'm very fortunate.
You've not gained it in your time period.
No, it allows me to do some things that others really can't. I think about something like...
Or choose not to.
Or choose not to, right. I think about like our water plan. We've had water plan after water plan after water plan, but that's a really sensitive, delicate issue in a state like Kansas and probably others. You have to spend a lot of political capital to get anything done, because you're going up against some really powerful groups. I've decided that I'm going to do that, and because I do have the political capital, we also happen to have a lot of money left over from the pandemic. Yeah, it does help. So the stars have sort of aligned, and so we're putting a lot of resources into coming up. I know I won't solve the problem before I get out of office, but I want to make sure that we've got a plan in place and that we've got a funding source in place before I get out of office.
Well, Governor, thank you very much. We're already over our time. Thank you all for joining me.